Right, so these are the first identities that we get to. We get to a lot more later on. And actually, I would say from here to here, I wouldn't even call them identities. They're more like definitions. I mean, the sine is 1 over the cosecant. The cosecant is 1 over the sine. Right? Cosine is 1 over secant. Secant is 1 over cosine. Tangent, cotangent. I mean, that's kind of just the way we define that. The quotient identities. Tangent is sine over cosine. Cotangent is cosine over sine. Right? The last three, though, definitely identities. Okay? And these are called Pythagorean identities because why? Because the Pythagorean theorem. So notice that in a triangle, on the unit circle, right, where this is 1, and that's a right angle, and this is the x and this is the y. So by the Pythagorean theorem, x squared plus y squared equals 1. But on the unit circle, x equals cosine and y equals sine. So actually, if you substitute for the x and the y, you get sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. So that is the Pythagorean theorem. We've just substituted x equals cosine, y equals sine. And we already use Pythagorean theorem so many times, we do accept that as being true. That is just restating it in terms of trigonometry. Sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. Now the next two are not as obvious looking, but the fact is right, this is a page in your book. So you shouldn't be wasting your time writing a page which is in your book. Ready? So take the first one, which again is something that we accept as being true already. It's just a Pythagorean theorem. If I divide both sides by cosine squared, then that means divide this by cosine squared, divide this by cosine squared, and divide this by cosine squared. Sine over cosine is tangent, so that's tan squared. Cosine over cosine is 1, and 1 over cosine is secant. That's the second identity. Right? There's written 1 plus tan squared, same thing, commutative property. If you did the opposite, not opposite, but instead if I divided sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1, if I divided everything by sine squared, let me finish. Sine over sine is 1. Cosine squared over sine squared will be cotangent squared. And 1 over sine is cosecant, so that's cosecant squared. So those second two are the Pythagorean identities. You know, they come from the sine squared plus cosine squared. With a very little bit of manipulation, you can make them into the others. I mean, you're going to use this one a lot, and you'll use this one less, but a fair amount, and you'll use this one the least of them all. But if you're having a hard time remembering them, I always just start with that, and I just divide by one and the other and figure out, okay, which ones go together.